Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss about ESG. Very important. Developing nation has to know more about ESG. We have our two world famous speaker, Professor Beth and Professor Dev, and these are very important discussion. I believe that we are creating awareness. They are climate change activists, and they have a huge contribution in developed world through their organization, through their book, through their research for climate change. Professor Betlab, how you want to analyze ESG? And you know that we are actually trying to solve the climate change related problem in developing world. How ESG will be helpful for the developing world. And then definitely we have our big man, Mr. Dave and Mr. Jason. Mr. Dave has his book. We will discuss about book. Professor Dave Beth.
Thank you so much, Sharif. I appreciate you and the World Talent Economy Forum so much. And I was just saying before we went live that I appreciate your courage in bringing on guests that are not necessarily going to speak what's most comfortable for people to hear, but or who are going to bring facts and truth alive on your show. So what I want to say is that, you know, my areas of expertise, I'm a minister first and foremost, but I have had a very varied career, and I'm a Renaissance woman per se. And also I believe in the concept of holism. All systems are interrelated with each other. We can't tease apart one little item from another or one topic from another. And you know, what's good for the whole isn't always what's good for an individual investor. And so I also have a lot of expertise in the area of not just climate crisis. The climate crisis is very huge, but also the sustainability crisis more broadly. And in fact, we have 3 planetary boundaries for which we're further out of alignment than the climate crisis. And so we're in dire shape in that area, in the environmental area. We're also in dire shape in terms of global health. You know, we have in the developed world epidemics of chronic heart disease. That's not me, I hope. I don't think it's me. Okay, in the developed world, we have these epidemics of chronic health disease, such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, metabolic disorder, etc. The developing world is copying our example in terms of lifestyles, particularly diet. And so these diseases are on the rise there, as well as incredible world hunger still coexisting. So that's just 2 things, health and environment. In terms of our social reality in the world, we also have rampant exploitation of marginalized people, and we have a model that has been developed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. So we're in crisis on every front. I could go on and on. We're in crisis on every front. And so when I think of this idea, if you just take the initials ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and it's primarily, for those who don't know, it's primarily used in investment, looking for companies that are doing the right thing as corporate citizens, that are doing the right thing by the environment, that are governing their own internal affairs appropriately in a way that's marked by equality and justice, and also that they're thinking about their impact on the social structures of the world. So if you think about that, it sounds all really nice and everything. Like, that's what corporate citizens should do. But I think what I want to say in terms of your question, just in short, and I'll say more later, of how do I analyze this? What I want to say is that I am quite clear that tweaking the current corporate model does not hold the solution to these global world problems, that we cannot tweak the model that is at the root in terms of causation of all of the ways that humanity has gotten it wrong and somehow get it right, that is not a possibility. And I'll say more later, but I just want to start that that's my basic proposition, is that the whole model of how corporations are construed it does not hold the solution to our problems.
Okay, excellent. One thing I just want to add, actually, in the developing world, as I develop myself, I grow in the developing world. They are actually not 100% copying developed world. That is number one. Let's say you are working in food industry. I can remember our farmer, because I developed myself in a very small villages in Bangladesh. It's a very small city, Rajbari. So from my childhood, I closely meet and integrated with the farmer, local farmer. Trust me, they have their traditional things. They do not need satellite. They can understand when rain come, when season will change, what is happening. They do not need satellite. I can remember. My grandmother, I want to say even she is highly educated. Actually, all of my fathers and my father, uncle, and my auntie, all of them highly educated. She had 11 children. 11, it's a big. So, but what I learned from my these villages, uh, they know their traditional factors. They know the traditional methods of producing food, producing cows, producing fish, and that was successful model. But I'm very honest with you, after 90s, especially 1990s, what I can remember is, even I want to say, especially even 21st century, many multinational company go, example, in the developing nations. So when they go, so let's say once a time, let's say we have 30 different kind of fishes we produce in our pond or in our rivers. But when the multinational corporation goes, they bring different fishes, different food, different habits, this and that, and they apply it. They said, hey, you have a huge population, so you need to produce more. So you follow these things. And trust me, example, uh, uh, let's say our fruits, especially India, Bangladesh, fruits is very popular, the organic food, fruits, mango, and jackfruits. These are the things very popular. Uh, and the organic fruits, this was very tasty. I can remember the organic fruits was very tasty. But when this kind of multinational company, they introducing different agro-based technology, agro-based production, these and that, then I'm very honest with you, lose the capacity. Then we have more diabetic patients, we have more cancer patients, then we have this and that. Even though you can check my records in the COVID-19 situations. Example, UN, World Bank, they produce some report. They say this amount of 20 million people will die in Bangladesh, India, this and that. It's not happen. I do not want to argue with that, but why it's not happen? Actually, the grassroots level people, especially those who live in the slum, those who live in the grassroots level, they have uh, different food habits, this and that, and they actually know how to fight with the uh, uh, different things. So that's why I want to say we need something combined. We need more research. That's for sure. We need more research. We need to collaborate with developed world and developing world. We need more research and how we can create a sustainable economy, a circular economy. This is also important. And you people are expert. You can guide our audience how we can develop a sustainable economy. Professor Dev has an excellent idea, excellent book, and he is actually doing work with the grassroots level. That is my interest because he is trying to re-educate the family. Am I right? So when he try to educate the family, this is the most important part of the society. So, Professor Dev, how you want to share your views about ESG as well as your interesting aspect of your book? You can share with us.
This is an interesting tightrope to walk because I agree with Reverend Beth Love that we are out of balance. The Bengali farmers are right. You have to eat what you grow, eat organically. Your grandmother having 11 children was the start of the problem. Not for the world, but for your family and for every family that did that. You think of the entire world. We were once in balance with nature as a species. In my short 80-year lifetime, we've fallen drastically out of balance. So now we ask a question: how do you create a personal and eventually a societal ESG that's sustainable in the long run? Well, your short-term returns, like having 11 children, must take a backseat to sustainability. The biggest question you have to ask yourself is, what is my personal impact on the world? am I on a small scale like Elon Musk, putting solar panels on my roof and putting an electric car in my garage, but burning millions of gallons of fossil fuels in my private jet and sending people on joy rides to space and on missions to Mars, is that appropriate or not? It's certainly not appropriate for him, and it's not appropriate for us as individuals to be doing the equivalent at the local level. Is it worth destroying the planet to make a small portion of the population rich beyond imagination, or do you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution? You can't have it both ways. This is about morality. Do we want to invest in what's good for your bank balance or in what's good for the planet? And these two thoughts are in conflict. The pursuit of profit at all cost has put the US into a situation, and the whole developed world into a situation, where we're all living on credit beyond our means to ever repay. Our national debt in the United States is $30 trillion. That's money we borrowed from the rest of the world. Our total debt is over $86 trillion, and our unfunded liability is $163 trillion. So in other words, each US citizen now owes $491,000 in unfunded liabilities like Social Security and Medicare and other government programs. The debt to GDP ratio is getting bigger all the time. It's over 100%. It's 126% right now. So I would say now, in late stage capitalism, thanks to the pursuit of profit at all cost, what does this have to do with ESG investing? Your investments should be fostering democracy and equality and justice and security, and they should be sustainable and maybe even regenerative. And they should enhance human dignity and democratic participation. They should reduce inequality and reduce authoritarianism, which we see growing right now, and systemic racism, and reduce environmental destruction and climate breakdown. So that's my basis. I'm with Dr. Love on this. We've created a system that must not be emulated because it is in itself unhealthy. What we're doing in the developed world is rearranging the chairs, the deck chairs on the Titanic as it's about to sink. And what we should be doing is trying to figure out how to get rid of the iceberg. And so we're definitely at odds with the planet. When I was a freshman in college in 1959, there were almost 3 billion people on the planet. And my conscience bothered me. 3 billion. There's no way the planet can support 3 billion. Now we're approaching 8 billion. So back to the beginning of the conversation. It's that family of 11 children that has put us out of whack. And it's not just that there are 11 children, but they all survived. And because they all survived, they didn't used to survive. So modern medicine created a situation where everybody could survive. And it's that survivability that happened within a context of a system that was irrational that created the system we have today. So we can talk about the details later.
Okay, no, this is excellent discussions, and I just want to add some point. Let's say what I learned from my big family. I learned teamwork. I learned contribution for the peoples. I learned how to communicate with the people. I don't know, like I saw this, those who come from a small family, some point, I'm sorry because I respect everyone, but some point I find that they are not too much of responsible. Example, I really enjoy World Talent Economy Forum. Different cultural people come. Example, different cultural people come. Different views and different opinion actually come. Even if you see that Bangladesh economy It's a rising tigers. Even in the COVID situation, Bangladesh GDP actually good because of their population, because of their highly educated even populations. I can remember our economic conditions from 1985 to 2021. It's actually developing. It's actually growing. It has a positive impact. Yes, even every classes I read, overpopulation is bad. Overpopulation is bad. But my grandmother, she developed with her. She's highly educated with her agricultural knowledge and everything. She developed $1 million asset, and most important, she developed highly educated children. And even my father served for the nations, my uncle served for the nations, my auntie, even like women education also important. My auntie also doctors and everything. So education is important. If you have a proper educations, and I believe that if you have the right kind of strategy for your family, and I really like your book because you are focusing on family, which is very important, which is the nucleus of the society. So that is important. Beside that, we have our friends from Transhumanist Party. I request everyone, because Transhumanist Party last 2 weeks they attend many interesting debate. I attend in the Oxford Union and in the Cambridge Unions, and I attend World Debating Championship, one of the classic debate actually happening in World Talent Economy Forum every Friday. So I request everyone, the chairman of the Transhumanist Party, he regularly join in the debate. I request everyone, please observe the debating. It's really important for developing the democratical argument, for developing the policy, for developing
Friday,
this
huh?
industry
Friday.
4.0. Friday.
Who?
Friday.
What's
Yes.
the next? What's the next topic on Friday?
We focusing on electric car. All cars should be electric.
Uh,
So there is a government, there is an opposition. So definitely this is very interesting. So previous sessions, actually we get a huge response from the audience. We collaborating with Oxford Union, Cambridge Union, World University Debating Championship. So I invite you all, observe the show, and definitely I also invite you for the debating. Mr. Jason, so what the argument you want to add for ESG?
well, you know, I'll start. I guess I believe that humans are basically inherently good people, but I think we're also kind of maybe inherently lazy. So I think for it to be sustainable, we need to make it easy for them. And I love the argument. Well, I don't know. There's the argument that we need to try to limit the emissions and all of this, and that's all well and good, and we should. But I think the real answer is going to be technologies that actually clean up the problem and fix the problem. Whenever you ask somebody, oh well, you're gonna just quit smoking or just quit doing that, that doesn't it doesn't work. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get people to just stop doing what they're already doing. So that's why I liked. There was a lady that came on named Viva Kundleaf. I think I entered a link in the private chat for her. She has this machine that it's made out of ceramics, and it's kind of complicated, but basically it cleans the air, and there's these little units, and I found that extremely fascinating. And I think that's technologies like that is uh, the way we're really probably going to end up having to do it. You know, but although I agree, you know, social issues are important, and we're going to need to be, sustainable in our social issues going forward as well. But it's just harder to do that. And I liked how how Sharif mentioned earlier about how we from the developing countries will come into a country, and we just assume that we know the right way. and that, our way is better, and like he was talking about the fruits, they had fine. Everybody liked their own food that they had, and as soon as the outside comes in, they're bringing in all this extra stuff, and I think we're still guilty of that. Like I remember out in the West, there was a time period when they got rid of all the wolves. And they figured, well, it's better. We want to raise cows. We don't want to have being taken by wolves. And they're gone. They got rid of them in the whole area. Well, what we didn't understand was that that it's interconnected. Like you were saying earlier about that. We have to understand that it's a whole organism. It's a whole thing, and that the wolves, by being a predator, would cause the other game animals to bunch up, okay, and then move around. And the process of them bunching up and moving around would till the soil, fertilize the soil, and then they would move on. And then so the wolves actually were good for the entire environment as a whole, and we just did not realize that. And then today, that's why a lot of Western ranchers will act kind of like the wolf. They'll herd their cows around from pasture to pasture, keep them together, and so it just goes to say that we gotta be aware that things are more complicated than they may seem. We might not always be completely right with our first answers. Glad to see you back, Sharif.
Yes, thank you.
Difficulties.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, we are discussing about ESG. So what you want to add?
To me, this is an issue that is still in its growth stage. If you look at how environmental, social, and governance all comes together, it's still kind of a Wild West environment there, but it's one that we're beginning to see a lot of growth from. The data market for ESG this year passed $1 billion, which is kind of an interesting thing because the term ESG is so hard used. To give it kind of a data point, in 2019, the marketplace for ESG was about 500 million. So there's quite a bit of growth. And some of the interesting places trying to look around where it's being used is Europe is actually the largest user globally of ESG, and with about over 60% of it. About 40% is in America and about 7% is in Asia. So you're seeing it going around the world in very disappropriate ways to kind of look at it. The buyer of a lot of the data that comes out of ESGs, though, are asset managers. So they're looking at how to manage the assets in the large funds and things to be able to do a better job. And they're looking at the companies to see who can do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And we see that going. The other thing with ESG, though, that is kind of appropriate as I look at this is if you go back and look at where some of the publications like Financial Times is going, they've recently came out with an editorial in Financial Times that this is necessary to refine and mature for us to meet any of the targets we have in the green environment and out of COP. And so COP really is built on around us using ESG as a tool to meet the objectives of COP.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Professor Betlam, one thing, like when we're discussing about ESG, especially even I'm a big fan of women empowerment. This is the major issues that we have to work right now. Even the COVID-19 situations, that is the reality that many women lose their job. Economically, they have a lot of challenges. What is your advice when we are discussing about ESG? Definitely, it's investment. So, how actually the developed world invest on women empowerment, as well as how women get benefit from this economic strategy?
Mm, mm. Thank you so much. You always ask the best questions. I do want to address just a couple things that were said first, but I definitely want to get back to your question about women and investment strategy and making sure that we're considering women in terms of equality. So I just want to say that I do not, I agree with so much you said, Dave. Dave, I agree with so much that you said, but I do not agree that large families are the problem. When we really look at what's going on, the developed world in which family size has been shrinking is still the primary driver of the environmental problems that we're facing, the social problems that we're facing, the governance problems, et cetera, et cetera. And the developing world, I do not believe it's a problem. And in terms of whether or not the Earth can support this many people, there's been my area of expertise when it comes to the environment is food, and there's been a lot of research that's shown that the Earth, as large as it is, without growing at all, can support and amply feed the 10 billion people that we're growing toward if we shift toward more plant-based diets. That is the shift that will be needed. And, right now, the way we're living in my country and in much of the developed world, it would take 1.37 entire Earths to feed the current world population. If we wanted to make sure that everybody had enough to eat, we need another more than a third of an Earth. And that wouldn't leave any room for anything else, forests or glaciers or, buildings, et cetera. It would be growing food on the whole Earth if everyone in the world ate as we do, because the way we eat is what's putting our population out of whack. The mass of our livestock on the planet, that's the largest biomass, especially when you look at mammals. But if you look at the mammal biomass, humans are larger than the entire wild population of the Earth. It used to be the opposite. 10,000 years ago, humans were this tiny little bit, and wild populations were this big, and our livestock were just a little bigger than us. Well, now the wild populations of the Earth have shrunk to this tiny little bit. We are like this much, and our livestock are like off the charts. That's the biomass that's using the resources of the Earth. So I think it's really not complete enough analysis to say that large families are the problem. Sharif, I want to just 100% agree with what you said about the farming and the foods and the indigenous wisdom and the wisdom that was found in communities, whether it was a large biological family or a tribe or a community. There's wisdom there. We need to live more tribally. We need to live in these systems where we're supporting each other rather than in this model where everybody's on their own, or where each one of us is trying to rise our own family up at the expense of others. So back to your question about women and ESG. I'm just going to say again that, I want to give you a story. I want to share a story. I was preparing. I knew that I was going to get a sum of money that was more than I've lived very marginally. I mean, this is not marginally. I've lived a large life. I'm very blessed. I feel wealthy by all standards, but I've worked in small nonprofit organizations all my life, in industries that are very poorly paid because of social inequities, such as in my country. I used to run Montessori schools, and any work with children is very poorly paid in my country. well, except maybe doctors or something. But if you're teaching young children, don't expect to have a large salary. So I've lived on very little money, but guess what? I've lived large because I don't believe in buying a lot of things, and I believe in living very simply. So, but I knew I was going to be getting some money, and so I started doing some research to find somebody to help me understand the world of investing. So I asked friends for some referrals, and I started calling these people that were referred. And someone that was referred by a friend of mine who's done very well in investing, I got on the phone with him, and I tell you, I wanted to vomit from everything he was saying about ESG. I felt so sick to my stomach because everything he was saying was so out of alignment with my values. What I know to be true is that there is another way, that we have developed a structure, a human structure on Earth that has brought us to the brink of extinction. We have developed a human structure on Earth in which it's okay within a structure for millions of people to be starving, while millions of people have extra yachts and extra houses and are taking joy rides, as Dave was talking about, out into outer space. We have created a human structure that is organized completely around the wrong thing. It's organized around what will make the most money for the people who already have a lot of money, and who are the best at taking advantage of this system. That's what we're organized around. We're organized around the wrong thing. So what we need to organize around is a commitment to ensure that all life can thrive within the habitable boundaries of a planet that amply and abundantly supports our needs. And that is entirely possible. And there has been a lot of work that has been done that shows that that is entirely possible. But we must reorient our values. We must reorient our commitments. And we must reorient our consciousness. We have to start thinking differently if we want to start acting differently as a human species. And we don't have a lot of time for a major transformation to occur. But I believe that it is possible. And I believe that, in many traditional systems, women were the ones that carried the wisdom. Women were the ones that tended to our home. And we have seen in many spheres of influence, when the percentage of women rise, for instance, when the percentage of women rise in government, we do see less wars. We do see more people getting their needs met. We do see that maternal instinct coming into play. But you know what? Women cannot carry this alone. We all have that within us. We all have those traits within us. We all, I believe, are good. I don't believe that we are lazy. I do believe that we are influenced by the dominant paradigms in which we grow up. But I believe we can change those paradigms. And I believe that we all have within us, like, I don't know anyone. I really seriously don't. I'm not saying nobody exists, but I know a lot of people. I don't know anybody who thinks it's a good idea for us to hurt and maim and destroy other living creatures for our pleasure. And that it's okay and actually the right way for us to create a world in which there's inequities. And I don't know anyone who thinks that it is a correct or good idea to destroy the earth so that some people can have more money. I don't believe that we are like that. I believe that we are good and decent people, and that we want what's right, and that we will do what's right if we know what's right. And if that is the dominant paradigm, if together we are moving in the right direction, I believe we will do the right thing. And lots of people are moving in the right direction. Lots of organizations are moving in the right direction. And corporations, in terms of the ESG, in terms of the question about ESG, I just have to say, okay, back to the story about this guy, this investor. This guy was teaching me about investing, or, he was trying to get my business, right? He was saying, oh yeah, environmental, social investing, that's where it's at. That's where you can make a killing. That's how you can get rich. Yeah, that's you have to do that. If you're going to invest and you're going to make money now, this is what you have to be thinking about. He knew nothing about the environment. He knew nothing about social structure, social inequity. He knew nothing about appropriate governance. All he knew was that this was the way to make the killing in the market. And so as long as ESG is about making investors feel good about where they're putting their money instead of upending the current paradigm, we're not going to get there, folks. Whether it's women doing it or men doing it, we're not going to get there. We need to upend the corporate model. We need to change our focus to what will allow all life to thrive within the habitable boundaries, the sustainable boundaries of our Earth system. And I do believe that women and people who get in touch with those so-called feminine values of mothering, of stewardship, of tending to our home, that all people who do that can lead the way to this revolution that is occurring and that we need to amplify right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent analysis, Professor Dev. Like, this is another things like when we're discussing about ESG, and as well as we want to make a sustainable economy. So, what do you think? What will be the role of G20? Those who have a lot of economical strength, like USA, like Canada, like Australia and Europe, as well as how their political organization and corporates, even academy, should play a role to make a sustainable economy.
Well, that's a big question for people who may be in charge of governments. And I am not in charge of a government. I'm part of the populace that elects or diselects people into governance. The problem is that we have like a speaker of the house, but we need speakers for the animals. We need speakers for the insects and the forests and the oceans and for the reefs especially. We have to change our system of governance. If we invest in anything, we have to invest in nature. We need to build global systems that provide every single human on Earth things like healthcare and income and shelter and food and water and sanitation and a little savings, but not savings that's going to grow exponentially because you've invested it in somebody else's lack of welfare. We need to invest in education for everyone. We need a cultural revolution to grow radically more aware of the folly of the way that we've lived and to mature and develop into the truer selves that we've been discussing, to become the laughing and caring and social creatures that we naturally are, not to be the dumb and grasping creatures that consumerism has told us to be. And when we end up being those grasping creatures, we end up being miserable and hating ourselves anyway. So the best investment that you personally can make is in a piece of rural land like Bangladesh, but above the elevation that will be inundated when all the ice on the planet is melted. And so sorry, but when the ice melts, Bangladesh is going to be underwater. So you have to make an investment in a place that is going to be there for a while, for a long time, for many generations, and learn to farm, or at least learn to garden and plant trees. And you plant trees for oxygen and for shade and for food, and stop driving a gasoline powered car. I completely agree. All vehicles should be electric. Everything we do from now on should be done with a motor, not an engine. And it should be powered by electricity. We should eat no food from far away. Eat local food. Be a locavore. Never fly again. I haven't flown for years, and I'm not going to fly again. If you have a local circular economy, your backyard, then you should take the waste from the critters that you're raising, which hopefully are chickens or fish, and put that back into the soil. and you have to become sustainable yourself. Until each of us does that, then we are a drain on the whole. We've got to think of our investments as a moral act. And any investment that deviates from sustainability is an immoral investment. For instance, natural gas. People say, well, natural gas is better than coal and oil. Yeah, but don't invest in it because you don't want to encourage it because it's still wrong. Wrong in what sense? Well, it's adding to the destruction of the planet. Nuclear energy. There's a big question about nuclear energy. Is it a green investment? I don't think so. So as far as investments are concerned, if your jobs that you're creating with the investment are not green jobs, and if you're not doing it using renewable energy, then you're not helping with the problem. You're really not part of the solution. So we need a stronger and fairer economy that can contain the spread of authoritarianism, because we see authoritarianism growing in our country, and I'm afraid around the world. And as long as we keep investing in the wrong thing, we're going to get the wrong people, and the wrong people are going to take us in the wrong direction. So that's my point of view. Now, my own work, and I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't want to bang on the drum too loudly. Well, here, I'll use one of these, is my book for families. It's called The Green Actioneer's Family Action Guide. And it has over 100 actions that families can take in order to save energy, save money, save water, and save the planet. It's designed to give people a step-by-step guide to going green, everything that a family can do. Now, it's not written for Bangladesh necessarily. It's written for the rich world, trying to get people who have too much to share what they've got. Hope that they will become sustainable, become regenerative, and become sharing people. So that's my contribution, is the Green Actioneer's Family Action Guide. And I'm creating it for the United States. And I've got friends around the world who are creating it for their countries as well. Because the things that we do are not necessarily going to be the same in a rich country as they are in a country that's not rich. And so my suggestion is that people get a copy of the Green Actioneer's Family Action Guide when it comes out. It's going to come out in April on Earth Day. We're going to launch it on Earth Day. I will send people digital copies now if they get in touch with me at davefinnegan@greenactioneers.com, and I'll send a digital copy and you can look through it. And I'd love to have it available in every language, in Bengali and in Malay languages and South Asian languages. And I've already got somebody doing it in Australia and New Zealand and Britain and France and Germany. So the book is going to be worldwide, but it's just a baby right now, and I got to take care of my baby. So please keep it in mind as a possible piece of the solution to the problem. But the solution to the problem really is far beyond the work of any one person. It has to be to create a dominant ethos in the world that is in balance, and we don't have that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, like you are also part of Transhumanist Party. Okay, so what do you think?
In that book he was just talking about, I admin a group called Off Grid Transhumanist Community Project. I would love to make that available for them. We've been trying to collect information like that to put together, well, kind of like a plan, what you just did for families, but for a whole community. You know. But go ahead, Sharif.
Yes. Look, as you are part of Transhumanist Party, so what do you think? What will be the role of developed world, especially government, is important Example, transhumanist party get positions in parliaments, and when they have opportunity to help the global community, what will be their role for implementing ESG for developing world?
Well, I see the USTP's role as the idea people, you know, because there are problems that are coming down the road that these governments are going to have to answer. And so if we have some answers for them, when they go to answer that question, they can be like, well, these guys have this answer. Let's try that. You know, there's a lot of people that, they don't support the USTP because they see it as like it's a pipe dream. What's the chance that you're really going to, get somebody elected president? But that's not really the point. You know, we could still have influence and, get policies in place without, you know, having a presidential candidate, y- you know, uh, and as far as the environmental problem in the economy, it's rather a difficult question because of the fact that, well, it's kind of like capitalism itself. We know it needs something. It's not right. It has these bad things that cause problems, but it's also our engine. It's like we're traveling down the road, and that is what is getting us down the road. We can't just throw out the engine because and fix it while we have to keep. You can't throw out capitalism and just try to start all over, because that's not going to work so good. So we have to find a creative way to, the best answers are the answers that cause the problem to be irrelevant anymore, and it just evaporates. It's not even a problem anymore. You have to make it easy for people. The same way that capitalism has these bad effects that sort of come along with it, you make a system that has good effects that just come along with it, which is a difficult thing to do. It requires a creative solution that is steps ahead. So that's what we got to do.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, creating awareness for ESG also very important. What is your advice how we can create more awareness for ESG?
Well, awareness is something that is needing to come in many different levels. In going through some of the comments, yeah, ESG was really designed by the investment community to attract particularly millennials into the investment pool. But then it's become broader and accepted more on how do you make the green movement actionable. The problem you have in so many things, as we've spoken before, is the whole ESG approach is a global environment, and what you do in one country helps, but it doesn't really address the problem. So you have to address it on a global basis, and you have to address it broader than any local politics or any local investment manager. It has to go there. One of the exciting things I've seen with ESG, though, is beginning last year, we're now seeing some universities put in place ESG curricula. And that is one of the things that needs to be happening is you have to have people who are trained to understand the principles behind ESG, to understand the cause and effect, to understand the regulatory side. ESG as an investment term doesn't get you anywhere without the regulatory side to work with it, without the corporate involvement to work with it, without citizens understanding what's going on. So it really is thing where you have to involve the regulatory environment. You have to involve the corporate environment. You have to involve academia. And at the end of the day, the people who invest in the corporations, the people who receive the benefits from the government, the consumers, they have to buy into it as well. It's like if you look at the uptake of things like electric vehicles. Uh, Living in Texas, it's hard for me to take an electric vehicle where I have to stop twice or three times to drive from Austin to El Paso and recharge the battery. And you see that, and it takes a day trip and turns it into a 2-day trip. And it's hard as consumers to accept things like that, even though it's good for the environment. So there's a whole list of things of dealing with ESG as a complex problem. There's not simple solutions. It really is a complex problem, and it's a global challenge that it's part of the solution as you try to solve this grand challenge. So, Sharif, I hope that kind of addressed it and the different stakeholders. The one place that's kind of missing on ESG is the entrepreneur side, is that you can, as an entrepreneur, begin to develop small solutions, but ESG looks at the broader problem. So it's hard as an entrepreneur to get in and influence ESG outside of some maybe corporate investment funds.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really great discussion, especially many audience bring an important aspect. Beside that, our speakers, they actually contribute a lot for ESG. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I request all of our audience, please share our content with government, with corporation and academy, which is very important for us. And definitely through this process, maybe we can solve many complex problems of the developing world. Professor Bedla, what's your concluding remarks today?
Thank you, Sharif. It's been a wonderful discussion as always. Excuse me. I was telling Sharif that I was live on Facebook with a New Year's Day food extravaganza, and I've sort of lost my voice from talking all day. But yeah, so I want to say that I really appreciate a lot of what's been shared here. And I just think discernment is really crucial. I've been involved in the environmental movement for a long time. And I see that there's a lot of greenwashing, what's called greenwashing going on, in that everybody wants to do what's right by the environment. So putting the word green on the name of a company or on a product, or putting labels like natural or what are some of the other labels that are being used, green, sustainable, many labels that are not regulated in any way. They mean absolutely nothing. They're on there for the purpose of getting someone to buy a product. And I think that we have to be really careful in terms of ESG in the same way. It's broader than just greenwashing. That if people really want to invest in ways that bring about the world that we can continue living on, that the world in which all life can thrive without transgressing our planetary boundaries, then I think treading a little bit carefully in terms of how you invest, or very carefully in terms of how you invest, is important. And that the right place for investments might not even be in a corporation, no matter how responsible they are in terms of ESG, or it might be. And it might be, when I finally found a financial advisor who was more aligned with my values, he was saying, maybe look for some small local companies that are doing good work. You don't have to look for the ones that are coming out on the top in terms of all these indexes. What are some things happening in your local area that you can support? What are some nonprofits that you can support? What are some game changers in terms of changing human consciousnesses? Are there some filmmakers who are making films that are bringing some of these important messages before the public? Are Are there influencers that you want to support that will change the world? And so I think if people have money to invest from the investment side, discernment is important. And I think from the corporate side, I would just encourage corporations to not just take this as an opportunity to make more money, that any individual corporation can become a better citizen by, yes, the corporate model, one of the problems with the corporate model is that it's the purpose of the corporation is to make as much money as possible for the stakeholders. That's like the driving force. And so an individual company can find ways to make money that truly are responsible and that truly will help the environment. And that if they're going to use this ESG label, I would really encourage them to do so. And finally, I just want to add a couple of things from my area of expertise to what's been spoken here. We talked about the planetary boundaries and what the problem is, whether it's too many people or I mentioned how we're eating. There's certainly been some conversation about energy, fuels and energy, and electrification and things like that. I want to point out, and I'll put a link to it in the comments, the the work that was done a number of years ago to look at what are our planetary boundaries, like what are the different Earth system processes that need to stay in balance in order for us to have a habitable world. And the Stockholm Research Institute, I believe it's called, identified 9 such boundaries. So things like the climate, things like our fresh water use, our land systems change, the biogeochemical flows, which is the nitrogen and phosphorus flowing into the environment and how it interacts with the environment, our ozone, things like that. There's 9 of them. And I'll link to an article, and I'll also link to a model that shows the 9 planetary boundaries and where we were in 2015 when this work came out. And we're already out of the safe zone on 4 of the boundaries. Okay, the 4 boundaries that we're out of the safe zone on: the climate, the biogeochemical flows, again, the nitrogen and phosphorus, and the land use, and then the one that we're the worst out of alignment on, the furthest out of the safe zone is biodiversity, the life of the planet. And if you look at those 4, unarguably in the scientific community, animal agriculture is responsible for us being out of the safe zone on 3. And the 4th, the climate crisis, for which we're the least far out of the safe zone, there's a major contribution from animal agriculture. So changing our diets has and corporations making it easier for people to do so, but not by introducing things that are only marginally better, like these processed fake meats, but really corporations that can find a way to lift up healthy diets, healthy, sustainable diets. That has a potential to really make a difference for our Earth. And so again, let's look at food. Let's look at the contribution of food. Let's go back to those indigenous patterns of eating the organic fruits that we grew locally, of bringing our own local systems into balance, and not letting the corporations determine how we eat, how we live, what we drive, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Professor Dev, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, I'm going to go back to my book because I love my book so much. This was my investment. We had about $50,000 that we could have put into something. And I went, sweetheart, to my wife, I'm going to write a book. And this is what we're going to put our money into. So to hire the artist and to get the book properly edited and to get ready to distribute the book has been a $50,000 investment. But this investment is going to pay us back, not me and my wife, but the world. And that's because I didn't think when I started this investment, how can I make a lot of money? I thought, how can I make a lot of difference? It's like when I went to Korea in 1966 to work in their family planning program. I never thought I'm going to make a lot of money. I thought I'm going to help the Korean government and people. The average family size when I got to Korea was 6 kids. Now the average family size in Korea is 1.6, less than 2. So what happened? Over that 50-year span, first, the average family is now making not $800 as it was in 1966, but $35,000 today. And the average family is consuming at the level of or above the level of the average American family. So the difference that reducing family size made was not immediately good for the planet. It was immediately bad for the planet because it meant that people got richer and that they put their money into the wrong things. And they created a country and an economy that unfortunately now has to reconsider itself. And so that's why the book is helpful in a rich country, because it tells you the things that you can do in order to live simply, in order to live sustainably, in order to be in balance yourself. It all comes down to the individual. Each of us and each of our families has to learn to live in balance. We have to learn to be good caretakers of our own space and then of the larger space. And yes, this is going to take some changes in the government structure, as Jason was suggesting. It's going to take a devolvement of the way that we govern ourselves, not in a way that's writ large, but a way that's writ small, so that our communities make sense again. In this book, we look at 4 different families, and the last family is a sustainable family. In fact, it's a regenerative family because it's a Native American family that never changed their ways, that over the centuries that the United States developed and became an economic powerhouse, this family, this community, this sub-community in our larger community kept ways. I don't know who that
Thank
is.
you.
They kept their ways, and they have now created a regenerative sub-community within the larger community. That's the model. We've got to, each of us, work in our own little way to help our neighbors and the people close to us, and think of it in physical terms, the people who are as close to us as we can touch. And we've got to get them on board with being not just sustainable, but regenerative. And that's where the Green Actioneers Family Action Guide comes in. I'll put it into the comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Dev. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks today?
To remember Nikola Tesla. You know, if we'd have been listening to him 100 years ago, we'd probably be where we want to be right now. I mean, you know, we'd have, you know, and so the problems that Beth brought up are, you know, she's probably right about the meat. Although that, to me, seems like a harder problem to try to get men to quit eating meat than to, you know, fix the world's energy problems. You know, Tesla has tech for that, you know, if we would just follow it, you know. But so I'm going to defer to the women on that, the meat problem, I guess, for now. But the population thing, to be honest, I think that the economy doing better and those families having more money is more of a cause of them having less population than it is that them having a smaller family caused them to have more money. That I think that as governments or as countries get more become more developed, it's just like a natural, sort of side effect that happens, that they don't need to have any more kids like that. So I wonder that, and I think possibly that the amount of kids people have is more of a reaction to their environment rather than the opposite. You know, uh, that's just just my opinion. I don't know if the data would bear that out. Yeah,
I was
but
a demographer who worked in the reduction of family size, specifically in Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Indonesia. We took a different approach, and that was that this is an engineered problem in a sense. I mean, an engineered solution, and we work with women exclusively, not with men. We meaning the thousands of field workers who were trained by the governments of those countries or by the Planned Parenthood federations of those countries, went house to house, door to door, and talked to women about how do you have a successful family, and the way that it was presented. For instance, in Korea, we said the way to have a successful family is first, girls are as good as boys. That flew completely in the face of the culture. And second, have only two at most and space them well. Well, that was a brand new message, and it changed the culture. Now, if you ask a Korean, would you rather have a girl or a boy? They would say, I don't care. Or they would even say, I'd rather have a girl. Because we, in a sense, engineered that change, created a culture in which small family size was revered instead of large family size. And as a consequence, the dependency burden went down. People were able to invest in their kids instead of putting money into, having 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 kids. They could invest in 1 or 2 kids, and those kids became successful, got engineering degrees, and now they create the Kia and the other Korean marvelous machines.
that's cool.
So
I'd love to
do
see
it either way.
on that study. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, but mostly that story has not been told, because the people who told the story were the demographers, and the demographers saw the coincidence that family size was going down at the same time that economic growth was happening, and said, oh, the reason people's family size is going down is because the economic growth is happening. No, what we did was very much social engineering. We created small family size in order that economic growth could take place.
But you realize it's a big claim to say that you successfully socially engineered a culture
We did.
and to change the
We
whole
did.
culture. That's a big claim, just saying.
We did.
Yeah. But,
It's a big claim, and it happened.
well,
Okay. Thank you. Maybe we can arrange a debate on populations. We will, in the future, we will arrange a debate. Yes, both of the argument is very logical. What Professor Dev said, what Professor Beth said, even how Mr. Jason arrange different arguments and bring different interesting point. This is actually objective. We need to know about different opinion, different views. And beside that, this Friday, we have another interesting debate. I want to invite you all for this debating. Hopefully, through this different dialogue, conference, and debating, we can solve many problems for the developing world. Thank you, everyone, for joining to this session. This is really, really great session for our audience. Thank you. Bye-bye, and take care.